Hello and welcome to Thank God It's Friday. We're being joined by Sridhar Sivaram, the investment director at Enam Holdings. Thank you so much for coming over, Sridhar.
Thank you for calling me.
Well, the Indian markets continue to inch higher with the Nifty attempting to touch almost 8,900 today. What is your take on valuations now, because the markets clearly looked overheated?
Yeah, so I think we have to put this in context that the markets have gone up almost say 10%. You look at emerging markets, they are also up almost 10%. So we are seeing emerging market flows come back this year after the scare sometime in November. Right. They've all come back again, and India is roughly performing in line with emerging markets right now. And if you look at barring the FII flows, we know about the domestic flows also. They are very strong right now. So I think if I look at the combination of these two, I think this could be one of the major reasons for the markets actually going up the way it is. Also, at the margin, we'll have to accept that the earnings have been much better than the worst that most people anticipated. Right. And we are seeing with result after result that even a marginal better than expected result is having disproportionate result in the stock price performance. Right. So I would agree at the margin that the valuation do look slightly stretched, but it's possible that given the low base of this year, the earnings for FY18 may be slightly better. I mean, I would expect possibly a 15% earnings growth.
Right. In the past, a lot have complained about the lack of depth in our markets. We're finally seeing some investor flow from retail. Of course, we've seen so much coming in from mutual funds as well. My question is this here to stay? Can this actually be a good thing for a longer term?
I think this is great. As we say, the second or the third leg for the market. Because in earlier days, FIs were so dominant in terms of their positioning in the market. Anything that the FI did, the markets would move in line with that. Now we are seeing from last year that the domestics have almost been moving on the opposite side of the FIs. When FIs are selling, the domestics are actually buying. And given the lack of opportunity for the domestics, which is that if you look at the fixed deposits, they hardly give you 7-8%. Right. Gold hasn't done anything for 3 years. Property has stagnated for almost 5 years now. Right. The lack of opportunity for investors or generally people to put money in and to get a return, and I think generally Indian investors are not happy with a 5-6% return. At least the hope of a double-digit return keeps them happy. Right. Which is why we are seeing what we are seeing, which is flows into mutual fund, insurance, predominantly, which is ULIP. Right. And I think it's here to stay for the moment. We'll have to see how it goes. If the market at least trends in a sideways or a reasonably upward trajectory, we will continue to see flows. If we see a major global shock, then it's difficult to predict that.
Right.
But do you think the outcome of the state elections could have any implications for the market direction?
See, I think only the UP election is the major question here, and I think it's broadly expected that it's a very tight contest that's going on. In my view, even if that were to happen, which is assuming that BJP were not to do well, I think it may be a temporary setback. We've seen this year and last year, we've seen many negative news, and the markets has really shrugged all of them off. In fact, maybe on the same day itself in many of these events. I would expect a similar reaction, even if BJP doesn't do well. Right. Because I don't think at this stage people are really expecting that it will be a clear majority. Right. There are a lot of polls which suggest that this could be sort of a hung, or it could be a close fight between the SP Congress and BJP. Right. My bet is that BJP will be the single largest party.
Right. So the BSE IPO just happened right now. We saw a subscription at around 56 times. Subscription over 60,000 just for one IPO, 60,000 crores. This implies that there is appetite out there, investor appetite. But my question is the better part of this hunger yet to play out? And will it be stock specific and indiscriminate to primary and secondary markets?
I think this flow will continue. Keep in mind that, the benefit of demonetization is we got close to say 15 lakh crores of money which has come into the banking system. Right. And from there people will want to put it into various avenues to put it to use. Maybe at this point not all of it is withdrawn or has gone into the right destination where it should. eventually people will realize that there aren't enough avenues to invest, and the way IPOs have done well this year and the previous year, so there is a craze for IPOs right now, even though the allocations have been poor, but the end result, which is the listing gains, have been 20-30%. So I think that craze for IPOs will continue for a while. I hope the valuations for IPOs don't go berserk, because some of these valuations have been reasonable. I mean, it wasn't outlandish. I mean, even the BSE valuation, if you see, it isn't outlandish. It is reasonable. You can question whether they have growth or not, but I think it was reasonable. If the valuations are decent, I think we could continue seeing craze for the primary market. I think the secondary will continue, because a lot of the money is coming through SIPs, what I understand from all my friends who are in the mutual fund industry, that systematic investment plan itself brings about 3,000-4,000 crores a month. So I think that is here to stay. We'll have to see how the others play out.
You did address earnings in one of your earlier answers, but I want to understand, how long do you think investors will really wait for that double-digit growth in earnings to come through? Because there are chances that investors may not see those kind of numbers even in FY18, because GST implementation, of course, has unknown effects on the earnings growth.
Yeah. So I think what is happening in the market is that the market is disproportionately rewarding companies which are showing double digit or slightly better than expected growth. So I agree with you that it's highly possible that, so if you actually see the Bloomberg consensus for F18, it's actually currently close to 20% for FY18, and I do see that number coming down closer to 15. But even assuming that, even I'm saying 15, even if that doesn't happen, there'll still be companies which would have grown at 20%. What we are seeing currently is that those companies are getting disproportionately higher valuation, and they're getting re-rated constantly. My view is that given the fall in interest rates that we have seen because of demonetization, we are seeing benefits of lower interest rates now come to even some of the slightly stretched balance sheet companies. Because of which we will see lesser interest cost, as a result higher earnings for the market in general. And I think those seem to be some of the interesting plays right now as far as we are concerned. We are invested in many of the high PE companies, high growth companies also, but we are constantly in lookout for companies like that, because we think that that's where re-rating is possible and there's earnings surprise waiting to happen.
All right. Well, that also brings me to areas of opportunities that you see in broader markets, and perhaps mispriced bets that are there right now when it comes to sectors, subsectors.
So I think there are many growth stocks which you can argue are mispriced, but as I said, currently the lack of opportunity in the market is and the flows that are coming, which are coming very strong both from the FIs and the domestic, is leading some of these stocks to continue moving up. I would say that some of the NBFCs I would question right now, because I would want to see how cash flow based lending, how has that got impacted because of demon, because generally we hear that it's not just the previous quarter, some of the impact we are seeing even in this quarter. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Keep in mind that RBI has given some sort of dispensation to some of these companies in terms of recognition of NPAs. So I would be careful with some of the NBFCs which trade at very high valuation, especially the cash flow based lending NBFCs. Otherwise, on opportunities, as I said, domestic growth stories look much better, because if I look at the global stories both on IT and pharma, there are challenges, especially for IT, and pharma is really a stock specific bet that you're taking right now. And within the domestic stories, we do see interesting opportunities, especially in the roads, in construction, and generally the discretionary consumption space also is looking quite interesting.
Okay. You spoke about consumer discretionary. I just want to ask you that do you think valuations have fallen to reasonable levels now, because growth clearly is impacted, but you're saying that valuations have become reasonable, and that's probably it's more of a valuation bet that you're picking these companies?
So it's possible that, especially for discretionary, we've seen some impact on growth because of demonetization. It's possible that we see a recovery in this. Like, unlike in staples, if you lost your sales, it is lost forever,
Right.
and that is gone. You can't really, use more soaps or more toothpaste.
Right.
Whereas for discretionary, it's possible that there's a pent-up demand which is there.
Absolutely.
So we do expect discretionary to come back. It's very difficult to predict whether it's going to be U-shaped, V-shaped, but it's highly possible that we see a comeback of discretionary spend. So which is why I said that discretionary is looking interesting, because if you plug in a slightly higher amount of growth, then the valuation starts looking much more reasonable.
All right. Of late, there have been increasing speculations about a prospective merger between two large private sector banks, and yet another case between NBFC and yet another private bank. Your view on consolidation in the banking space?
No, I think consolidation is great. India has too many banks. I would have been happier if there's more consolidation on the PSU side.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that there is a mandate to do this. Mr. Vinod Rai has been public about stating some of these and their objectives. And I sincerely hope that we see some of the consolidation even on the public side. The private side, I think it's speculative right now. I really can't comment
Right.
much. Yeah.
Right.
But if it happens, one has to look at what are the terms of it and
Right.
which side of the swap ratio you are right at that point of time.
But if you had to choose between investing in a PSU bank and a private sector bank right now, PSU banks, of course, everybody knows about the kind of bad loans that they're carrying on their books. On the other hand, private banks obviously are trading at much steeper valuations. What would your pecking order be right now?
So clearly the private sector banks, but selectively some PSU banks also.
You would.
So we do have some PSU banks in our portfolio selectively. I mean, it's not like a en bloc all PSUs, very selective where management quality is good, and we know that the chairmans are going to be there for a while.
Right.
And we see some definitive effort in terms of resolution of NPS.
Right. Well, I also want to address the auto sectors. I know we've spoken about the discretionary, but there are certain companies and certain large cap companies in the auto sector which have shown tremendous strength irrespective. So this comes down to your investment philosophy. When do you decide that enough is enough? This stock has run its course. It's trading at valuations which are unheard of. What are those valuations?
Yeah, so I think we've seen this with many other sectors also, that you take staples for example. I remember in my previous avatar we had taken a huge call on staples sometime in 2009 post the new government had come and the market was very euphoric.
Right.
And staples at that time was trading at the lowest multiple in terms of the premium to the market, and we had taken a huge bet on staples at that time, and then they were like multi-baggers, and
right.
You can now argue that they are now trading at 2 standard deviation above their long-term mean. So at some point investors will have to take a call whether as long as growth is strong, I think people will continue to give those multiples. If growth starts to weaken, which is what we are seeing in staples right now, that your growth is weak, then they either go through a time correction or in many cases price correction also.
Yes.
I mean, you look at some of the staples and you see that they haven't done anything for 2-3 years. So I think we could see some of that. As long as growth is there, the least you can expect is that the stock will continue to move in line with growth. So I think to some extent people are giving a consumer sort of valuation
right.
to a discretionary,
right.
which I would agree with you that isn't normal. But given that the growth is very high, people are arguing, given that you can't invest in staples at these valuations without any growth, you're happy investing in discretionary
right.
with slightly higher growth.
Right.
Sridhar, what are your basic principles when you're looking to invest in a stock?
So by default, I'm a growth investor.
Okay.
So I look for companies which have slightly higher growth than the market growth, and haven't hesitated to pay a higher multiple.
Okay.
And that has helped me over many years of investing. And of course, the management quality is the other important aspect that we look at. And the other thing sometimes we look at is change in management, even though the previous management, or change in attitude of the management, even though they may not have had the best track record before.
Right.
And if you can align yourself with the promoter, sometimes you you can make large returns. I mean, I can immediately think of IndusInd Bank when the new management came, and their first QIP. I think in my previous avatar we were the anchor investors. I mean, we took almost half the size of the QIP. At that time, people would have questioned. But I guess you don't get those always. But the question of seeing if there's a change which makes sense.
Alright, just a couple of non-market questions. Now, a lot of the audience may or may not know that Sridhar is also a wildlife enthusiast. So, based on that, I want to ask you, which place in India would you go between now and say over the next month for good sightings?
So, I'm already off to Madhya Pradesh to an unknown jungle called Satpura, which is over this long weekend which is coming. So, I'm going to be staying inside the jungle in a small forest guest house with no electricity and no connectivity. So I find that some of my best ideas I get when I'm in the peace of the jungle, and where I don't have to look at any screens. So normally I come back rejuvenated with something interesting.
Excellent. And my final question is, what I got to know today is that Sridhar also reviews movies on Facebook. So Sridhar, I want to ask you, the last good film that you've seen?
That's a struggle actually, because of late I've been giving such poor reviews to movies. So I don't want, I'm just thinking possibly Pink was the last movie that I gave decent reviews. I also review movies in Tamil, Malayalam and Bengali. I think some of the regional movies are far better. I think I spent a lot of time watching regional movies, and their scripts are so original. I just keep thinking that why can't just Bollywood get it? Why can't they invest a bit more on script rather than just on stars? So
would you like to name a movie or two in the regional ones?
I'm just thinking actually I'm not able to remember the names offhand right now. I'm just thinking I can't remember.
That's fine. Sridhar, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And as for you guys, we'll see you next week once again. Oh, thank God it's Friday. Till then, it's goodbye.